and we're live on the Ultimate You podcast. We're here with Adam Archuleta, a total stud. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today. I used to train jiu-jitsu with this man, and he was one of the most durable, strongest, toughest dudes I knew. And then I ended up learning, that guy used to play in the NFL and all this stuff. And it was like, man, he's a one tough individual, both mentally and physically. So you're going to gain some gems today on life and success and physical fitness, all kinds of stuff. So with that, Joel, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you, Robbie, and welcome, Adam. So now as a listener, let me ask you this question. If you had fame and fortune, would you be happy? What if you had everything most people dream of having? Would you be happy? Well, you're going to hear a fairy tale come true about a young man who played high school football right here in Chandler, Arizona. He played well enough to be a two-time All-Central Region honoree and honorable mention in the state competition. Yet not a single college offered him a college football scholarship. Now, if that was you, would you just give up on football and figure, well, that's just not for me? Maybe you take up basketball or baseball or cornhole. But that's not what Adam did. You're going to hear exactly what he did in this podcast. But for now, just imagine 5 years after being a walk-on for Arizona State football team with no scholarship, he became a first-round draft pick in the National Football League and walked away with a $7 million contract, $3 million of which was guaranteed. How would that make you feel if that was you? And then a short time later, he signs a 6-year, $30 million contract, making him the highest paid safety in the history of the National Football League. Would that be a dream come true for you? Oh, and add that to that, he marries a Playboy magazine playmate. Yet in a very publicized, well-known article in the prestigious Washington Post, Adam is quoted as saying, football made him miserable. What? How could that be? Miserable, that's a powerful word. Have you ever been miserable in your life? And if you ever have, what did you do to stop being miserable? And if you ever run into it, you're going to get some good ideas here. So you're going to find out in this podcast how Adam, playing 7 years in the NFL, found happiness, started a second career, and currently is one of the top football analysts for CBS Sports and is constantly on television during the football season. And you're going to hear the answers to many questions that you would ask if you were sitting here with Adam. So with that said, welcome, Adam, and let's get this conversation started.
Wow, guys, so tough and durable. That sounds pretty fun. I wish I was tough and durable still in this day and age. And Joel, I've got to get that on an audio loop because that was one heck of an introduction. And I'm going to have to start my mornings with your little monologue right there to get me fired up and jacked up for the rest of the day. So thank you very much.
Well, I know you don't need to get jacked up, but let's go back in the past. How did you qualify for the NFL draft? And I think, am I correct that the combine that you set a record for speed and strength, and yet you considered yourself undersized, average, not that fast and not that strong, and yet in a very short time you set a record. How did that all happen?
Well, it's a long story, but the first thing I think you have to say is that it just came down to deciding that this is something I wanted to do. And I wasn't going to let any obstacle really stand in the way. I knew it was theoretically impossible, but I knew that if I found an angle and if I put in the work, that I would end up making my dream come true. So it started out by finding somebody who was a little unorthodox in the world of training and fitness. I found him, and through 5-6 years of just putting in an immense amount of work, I was able to transform myself from a guy that was athletically average. I was a good football player, athletically average to one of the best in the world. And so it's really kind of a story of doing whatever it takes, having, just the sheer willpower to do everything that nobody else will. And there was nothing that was going to stand in my way. So that's kind of the broad version of it, Joel.
Well,
but we can get as specific as you want to get.
Well, let me just say, since you and I we started working together, helping you with your speaking back in 2015. So I remember this story very well. But basically, as you're listening to this, imagine that you're a high school, a college athlete, and you have all kinds of assets available to you, like at Arizona State, strength coaches and stuff. But if I understand the story correctly, Adam, that while you were in college, you then hired your own personal trainer with these unorthodox methods to take you to a higher level. And I think the key thing that you said is you made a decision. You made a decision.
Absolutely.
And so what was some of the crazy things that you did in that training that got you to be faster and stronger?
Well, yeah. And, one of the things, having the background in being an exercise scientist, I'm curious about what do you think other guys were doing to try to follow the same path? And then you ended up doing things different, and how that produced a different result for you. Like what do you think was also like different?
Well, let's start from the beginning. It was always a goal, always a dream to be in the NFL. And I knew that I had to get fast. To me, everything is about speed. And so from a pretty young age, probably, a preteen, I started reading everything I could about fitness, nutrition, gaining muscle, gaining speed. And back then there really wasn't an internet. So this was based on magazines and subscriptions. And so I would read everything I possibly could. And I was with my dad at Christmas, and I was looking in the back of a muscle magazine, and there was a small little subscription, a small little ad for a powerlifting magazine called Powerlifting USA. And I asked my dad for Christmas, I said, "Hey Dad, can I get this subscription?" And so he said, "Sure, no problem." So 6 weeks later, I finally get this first issue, and there was an article written by a trainer in there, a guy that trained athletes. And it struck me as something so unique and so different than I had ever read before. And I just thought to myself, hey, I'm going to call this guy, see what he has to say. So here I am, I'm 17 years old. I call the number, I get a hold of him, and I say, hey, I read your article in Powerlifting USA. I want to learn more about it. And he said, well, that's really for advanced powerlifters. You sound like you're pretty young. One thing led to another. We started speaking, talking, and we found out we lived 15 minutes away from each other. So then I drove to his gym to meet him, and that's really where it started. So it just came from reading something that I knew was so unique and so different that this guy had to know something that other people didn't. So that's kind of how the relationship started.
Wow. And so when you saw that magazine, like what were some of the things that you said he was totally different? Like, what was it that was different? What did you see in the beginning in terms of his training style? Like, what was he doing kind of very extreme things, or like what, extreme negative, eccentric training, or like what was it that you saw?
Really, the gist of that article was how he used different energy systems it was really about peaking the bench press. So this was for elite powerlifters. But I had never heard of anybody talking about using the different energy systems that are involved in training and how we use them on a day-to-day basis in order to basically triple or quadruple the amount of volume that normal people could do without overtraining. Now, that's highly, highly technical. The magic really started the day I walked into his gym, and Joel knows this story. So imagine you're 17 years old, and my parents weren't the one driving this bus. Okay, this was all me. So my mom didn't hold my hand. She didn't walk me to the trainers. This was all me, 17 years old. And I walk into this building it was about 600 square feet. The roof tiles are kind of falling off. There's a huge Russian flag on the wall. And blasting over the stereo is like the Russian army choir, right? It was incredible. So I'm thinking to myself, what is going on in this gym? But I see this guy and I see a couple other guys training, and I see this old guy who was 65 years old. He was deadlifting like 600 pounds. And just when I walked into this room, I really felt like I was Ivan Drago, like I was in this Russian dungeon, right? And this guy was going to turn me into this machine. And that's really kind of how it started. So I walked in there. He ignored me for 2 hours, didn't even speak to me. I just stood there and watched these guys train. And then he proceeded to berate me and belittle me and tell me that I didn't have what it took. And that's really how the relationship started.
Wow. Wow.
So needless to say, I wasn't offended. I didn't get my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't walk away and tell my mom how this guy was talking to me.
Yeah.
When I walked into that gym, there was something about it in my mind. I said, this is how elite athletes train. Now, I didn't know that for sure, but in my mind, I said, this is what it's going to take. Like, nobody else is doing this stuff. Nobody's going to be putting in the work. And this is going to be my ticket.
Wow. Wow. So then what transpired from there? So obviously he kind of took you under his wing, you started training, and I'm interested, before we go further, like, I think it is interesting, like, and we can help, I can work with you on simplifying it, but like, what was he doing different in energy systems that made a difference? Like, for example, I had an amazing trainer. I had a very similar thing. I didn't get in the NFL or anything like that, like you did, but I did get crazily strong, but I also didn't have a goal of the NFL. So, but one of the things that he did that made a huge, and his name is Bob Clapp. You may have heard of him. His sons both, both sons played in college, and one of the sons did make it into the NFL. And his thing was like, prep the body for high failure sets, for very high level loads, without fatiguing the central nervous system first. So in other words, in simple language, that's you lift a weight for like 15 reps to prep, a very light weight. And then you work your way up into heavy weights, but you do it in such a way that you're not really getting to fatigue. So you do like a 6, and then you would do a 3 rep. And then you do like a 2, a 1. And then what happens is when you start lifting these heavier weights and like a 1 rep, very, very heavy, but you're not really building volume to get a high fatigue, it turns on the central nervous system. So the part of the nervous system that gets all the muscle fibers to recruit, because all the muscle fibers don't recruit when we lift, right? Until you put enough load that makes them recruit. So then what he would do is then you'd get very mentally fired up, and you'd do your 1 rep max, which worked amazing. And then we would even sometimes do an eccentric, the most amount of weight you could only control down. And you got 3 guys standing there to lift that weight off of you. And it turns your nervous system on so much that now your max rep that you must lift on your own gets so heightened. So for example, like that is one of the best training methodologies that I've ever seen for like really increasing the strength. So how was it different? How did it differ? What did you find?
Well, first I'll say this. I think at that time, so Jay had some relationships, and he had access to a lot of old Russian training manuals that he had translated. And so I think, I got to be honest, I was probably more of his guinea pig. I don't think he really had a system. It was just, hey, I've got this kid that'll do anything I say, and he won't question it, and he'll do it as hard as he can. And so I think he just kind of, let's be honest, kind of stumbled onto something, because he finally had somebody who would do all this kind of stuff. So to answer your question, that was a pretty highly technical question. The thing that really stood out to me is the way he talked about training differently than everybody else. And you said the word, it was all about how do you train the nervous system, because that's really what's important, right? It's the connection between your brain and how fast you can turn your muscles on and off. Right. That's athletics, right? And so everything, it was not about how big you get. It's not about how much weight or mass you put on. You want that nervous system to fire so you can be fast and powerful, right? So I remember one of the first things that night, as he was berating me and telling me that I was basically a non-athlete, he just talked about some concepts that nobody else had spoken about. And that was the need for high-speed training. So he said, we don't want you to bench 425 pounds or 400 pounds in 3 seconds. We want you to bench 325 in a quarter of a second. That's power, right? That's athletics. Right. Nobody ever talked about it. I mean, we're talking, this is in 1996. Right. And so nobody was talking about this kind of stuff. And so the way he used energy system training, we would bench and we would do upper and lower body every day of the week. There was no heavy day, light day, medium day. There was no chest and tries, back and bis. We did upper and lower body every single day. But the way he did the methodics and the methodologies is that you would basically on Tuesday, you would use a training methodology that recovered you from Monday. So we were basically getting 4 and 5 times the volume that everybody else was. And so it was high speed, high load every day, no breaks, no off days, basically preparing your body to turn on and turn off at will. And that's really, again, I keep saying this, but this was stuff that nobody was doing. Yeah. And inherently, I just knew, instinctually, I knew that, this was the way. But I got to tell you, he didn't make it easy on me. So imagine Mr. Miyagi. We know him, right? But imagine a Russian, a wannabe Russian. The guy, Jay, isn't Russian, but he's a wannabe Russian. Right. So the Russian version of Mr. Miyagi, like with some KGB tendencies. That's kind of how he treated me.
Yeah.
Well, without getting so technical, the end result is always what I look at. And so when you competed in the combine, which is the way I guess you get noticed in the NFL, what kind of results did you get when you did that based on what you learned from your trainer?
So my NFL, my combine and my pro day workout, that gained a lot of exposure and a lot of notoriety. And so, I say this humbly. I don't think I've known of anybody who is in the world really who has gone through this sort of a documented transformation. So if you understand what a 40-yard dash is and what fast is, right? When I met Jay, I ran in the high 4.8s, okay, which isn't very fast. After about 2 months of training, I got down to a 4.6. But really, if you want to play at the high levels, you need to be, sub 4.4, sub 4.5 to even have a chance. And that's really one of the main reasons why I never got a college scholarship. And so when I ended up testing for the pro day, I ran the 40-yard dash in 4.37 seconds, which was, which was really fast. My short shuttle time.
Is that a record?
No, it's not a record. Definitely guys have run in the 4.2s, but for me to go from a linebacker in college to transition to a safety in the NFL, you had to prove that you could run. And so really we needed to get to the 4.4s, but I ended up breaking into the 4.3s, which is pretty elite speed. And so if you take the workout in totality, it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 combine workouts in NFL history. If you consider my short shuttle time, my 3-cone time, my vertical jump, my broad jumps. Really, I went from a kid that wasn't wanted in college to literally one of the best in the world. And it took 5 years and it took 6 years, but it wasn't easy. But I don't really know of anybody else who documented has made that kind of a transformation. And I will say this, drug-free. So I did all this despite when I went to Arizona State, I went on campus, I was 190 pounds. And then 5 years later, when I tested for the NFL, I was 210 pounds. So I only put on about 4 pounds of a year, right? So for all the people that say, oh, he must have done drugs, he must have done steroids, if you know anything about it, if you're juicing for 5 years, you're not going to put on 20 pounds, right? So I put on about 4 or 5 pounds a year, but that was Jay's philosophy because he didn't want to, the goal was speed. So we're not talking about, we don't need mass.
Yeah.
We need the muscles to fire. We need them to turn off and we need them to be efficient. And so that's kind of the body that we built.
Yeah. Wow. Now, I remember Joel telling me one time that you had told him a story about you would run behind a truck or something, and the rope would pull you behind the truck. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, so we were, like I said, I was the guinea pig. So this started when it was the '96 Olympics when Michael Johnson. There was Michael Johnson and Donovan Bailey. I think that's when Michael Johnson shattered the 200 and the 400 record, right? And so I loved watching fast guys run. And Michael Johnson, Donovan Bailey was the 100-meter guy at that time, and they had two different running styles. But I was a kid trying to learn how to get fast, so I would study these guys and watch them, and we would break down their running style, right? And so I wanted to run more like Donovan Bailey, who had the high knee drive, and I just thought it was beautiful to watch. And so we were watching Donovan and we were watching Michael Johnson, watching replays of it and kind of breaking down their stride. And I just said, man, I wonder what that feels. What does it feel like to be like the fastest guy in the world, And so Jay called me up and he said, hey, meet me, over here in this neighborhood at, 6 a.m. We're going to try something. And so I said, okay. So I show up and he has, he at that time he drove a van, like a Dodge van. And he pulls out this contraption that hooked up to the tow hitch with a handle on it. And he said, you're going to learn and feel what it feels like to run fast. And so basically there's no safety equipment. I had to hold on to this handle. And he took me up to 35 miles an hour in his van, and I had to keep up. And so I'm tearing down the street, holding on to this handle and learning what it feels like to run, as fast and faster than the guys who are in the best in the world. So these are the types of things. I think one thing that I learned with Jay, but also kind of what I learned for myself is, when you're trying to do something, you need to learn the skill and you need to learn the technical aspect of it. But performance is feeling, right? You got to feel what it feels like to perform at the highest levels. You can't just look at a training manual. You can't just read it. You've got to internalize it. You've got to feel it. And until you do that and it becomes instinctual, you'll never reach your potential and you'll never be that high performer. So, he always did things in the gym. And then instinctively, I took that to the football field and in life. I want to feel things and ingrain it so that my instincts take over. Because if you're thinking about things too much, you can't perform fast enough. It's got to be innate. It's got to happen automatically. It's got to be burned into your subconscious. So I'm sure most parents these days, if a trainer said, hey, I'm going to hook up your son to the back of a Dodge van, you probably turn him in and call, protective services. But you know what? Look, when you want to do amazing things, you've got to be an extreme thinker. You've got to put yourself in extreme situations, and you've got to be okay with that kind of thinking. I think that was one of the lessons that I learned when I trained with Jay.
That's awesome. Yeah, extreme results takes extreme measures, right? Yeah.
And you've got to be willing to be. I've always gravitated towards people. I think anybody who's done anything worth anything in the world, you have extreme thinking, right? If you're self-made in any way, those are the types of people, and it manifests in so many different. You guys meet them all the time. I think Joel's an extreme thinker in the way he lives his life. He's fascinating, right? Those are the people that really, if you want to do something worthwhile, you've got to learn to think that way.
Yeah. And I think one takeaway really big for you and your story, Adam, is in terms of training is specificity. And so the way you train the muscle in simple terms is the way it's going to respond. So if you want to get really strong, you can lift a heavy weight, but that's not necessarily going to make you faster. But you got to be able to move the weight fast if you want to move the weight fast. If you want to lose weight, you need to spend a lot of energy, and it doesn't really matter that much if you're super strong or super fast. You just need to burn a lot of calories. It's like whatever you're after, you need to go after that. So what I'm seeing is like you have that extreme mentality of like, I'm going to go all the way to the nth degree, and then you got to make sure that ladder is on the right wall, the right house that you want to climb.
Right.
If you did the best powerlifting methodologies and maybe you bench pressed another 100 pounds, squat another 100 pounds, you maybe never would have made it into the NFL because you didn't do it with the explosiveness and the speed that an athlete requires,
Right. everything is about speed. Everything is about the nervous system. The brain connection is everything. It's really, in my mind, I know people want to get big and they want to buy, but it's the most important thing. And we just use training as that modality. And, I mean, I can go story after story on some of the things he made me do that just allowed me, going back to that concept of feeling things, is one of the main reasons why I got such extreme results. I don't know how we're doing on time. I don't want to go off on tangents,
Right.
but one of the things that, so Jay wouldn't let me work out with him. He said, I'm not good enough to train in his gym. Okay. So he made me work out. He told me he would write me a program and I'd have to work out on my own. Right. And so he told me to call him. He gave me the workout. And he told me to call him in 4 weeks. So I did the workout. I got some pretty good results. My bench went up like 40 pounds. And so I called him and he said, well, bring in your results and we'll go over it. And I was like, okay, results, what does that mean? So I walk into his gym and he said, do you have your training log? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And so he just berated. He basically, imagine like you're sitting in the gym in this little 600 square foot gym. There's 15 people working out. Basically the music stops and then he just berates this 17-year-old in front of like 15 people for 30 minutes telling me I don't have what it takes. I'm not dedicated. I mean, this is the kind of relationship that we had.
Right.
And so he told me that from this point forward, if I wanted to train with him, I would have to do my training log. And the training log consisted of every morning I would have to take my waking pulse, my waking blood pressure, my body weight. I'd have to record how much sleep I got, my dreams, what did I dream about. I had to record every gram of protein, fat, and carbs that I ate and the time of day that I ate it. And this was this is the part that really taught me how to be in tune with my body. So he made me either have somebody time the concentric part of every rep, of every set, of every exercise that I did, right? I had to time it with a stopwatch to see how fast I executed it. Every workout for 6 months. So it took me an hour and a half a day to do this training log. And I always had to have somebody time the concentric part of every lift.
Can I pause here for a second? Just so for you listener, the concentric rep is the part of when the weight you're actually lifting is going away from the floor. The actual weight being lifted is in the most simple term. Go ahead, Adam.
The eccentric is the lowering, the concentric is the pulling or the pushing force, right? So I had to time because everything was about speed. And so he made me do this. And if I didn't do this training log, he wouldn't train me anymore. So what I started to learn when I would time with precision every single rep, I got so in tune with my body. Now I could tell and understand if I was a 10th of a second slower, but then like say on a bench press, but then also I would know why. So, well, that rep was a 10th of a second slower. Well, my elbows weren't in the right position. Oh, I felt my shoulders slide up, or this happened, or that, you start to gain with this level. After about 3 or 4 months, I now understood what position I had to be in order to execute at the highest level. And so now when I go back to feeling things in instinct, that level of detail in my work, now I understood what the right positions were, what position I needed to be able to squat 400 pounds in a second. If I was in the wrong position, it would take me 1.75 seconds, right? So he made me do this. And so when I talk about the work that we had to do, this training log, the awareness I had of my body, I think without having that awareness and that really sort of expertise in my body and how it worked, I never could have been able to get the results that I did. So these are just some examples that I just don't believe that anybody else in the world was doing, especially not just a 17, 18-year-old on his own.
All right. Definitely not. Yeah. Wow.
Well, let me switch a metaphor here, because what you've really heard as a listener is that this is a learned skill, that what Adam did with his body, based on what his trainer was giving him, based on his commitment, he figured out how to make his mind-body connection. And since my part of this podcast is on the speaking part, it's exactly the same thing. That if you want to be a better communicator, think quicker on your feet, be faster in your responses. Speed is everything. You need to do what Adam did. Now, you don't need to be dragged behind a van at 35 miles an hour, but you might be outspeeding. Yeah. You've got to go to the gym, and the gym is in speaking is in front of an audience, whether it's virtual or live. And if you do it every day, and then the log that he kept on his fitness program, the same thing with you. What happened when I spoke? What were the results? How can I have been even better? And that's when you really get good at being an effective communicator, when you have that mind-body connection. So I just love everything you said, even though I'm not into all of that technical stuff. That's Robbie's area. It makes so much sense. So in summary, Adam, is this correct? First came the decision that you want to get in the NFL. To get to the NFL, you could not do what everybody else does. Find out what everybody else is doing and don't do it. Don't compete, create. That's what Earl Nightingale, the dean of personal motivation, taught me years ago. And that's what you did. You didn't do what every other college player was doing. And when you do those things and listen to somebody who knows more than you do, you get results. And everything is based on results. And if we look at your story, everything that you did from 17 on enabled you to get to that highest level in that sport, the National Football League, and then to become the highest paid player in your position at that time ever, all because of what your commitment was. So this is such a great example as you listen. Whether you're interested in football or speaking, it doesn't matter. You want to be good at what you do. And Adam has given you the keys to do it. So that was terrific.
And so I would like to add one more thing, Joel, to that. There was deciding, but then I think the real key ingredient is belief, right? You've got to like truly inside believe, like really believe it and know that whatever it is you want to happen is going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right? And so I think without the belief, like that, there's nothing in the world that can shake that. You might get, smacked, you might get beat up, you might even want to quit at times. But when you really have that deep belief that it's going to happen, then all the other things can happen as well. I think that's an important part of it. And the other thing that I would say too is that even with the training log, what it taught me, and I'm sure, Joel, you're going to agree with this because it applies to everything, is that when you're practicing, and that's really what training is, everything has to be super intentional, right? You can't be on autopilot and you can't just try to get through it. Every rep matters. Every detail matters. You can't skip over it, because if you do, you're not going to gain the level of learning necessary to be able to compete or execute at the highest level.
Yeah. Well, so when you achieved your goal. The goal was to play in the NFL. You played in the NFL. Then you got that bonus offer of $30 million to keep playing for a certain number of years. And then that famous interview that you gave to the Washington Post, where you said, and I want to make sure I got this right, that football really made you miserable. Now, here you were married to a beautiful woman, getting tons of money, achieving your life goal, being in great physical condition. What did that mean? Fame, fortune, beautiful wife, and not feeling good. Because I think that happens to a lot of people. What happened, and how did you turn that around to become one of the top TV commentators for CBS Sports now?
Well, that's a long one, Joel. And I don't have my psychiatrist's couch right now to lay on. So this is going to have to do. So imagine me laying in my psychiatrist's office. So yeah, there was an epic crash and burn. So I signed the contract, and then 2 years later, I was out of the league. There was a lot of little things that led up to that moment. But really what it comes down to was mental weakness. Okay. And what I mean by that is I believe that everybody at some point in their life is faced with something to different degrees that mentally challenges you so much that you're going to have to dig deep and you're going to have to find a different way to overcome it. Some people do, and some people don't get dominated by it, and they never recover. I got dominated by something that I just wasn't able to recover from. Now, I do believe that because I had a couple, really a major concussion in 2005, I believe that my will to compete was still there, but I believe my soul was trying to tell me, hey, man, you can't do this anymore. And years of throwing your body around, your head, I think something deep and spiritual was telling me that football wasn't for me, but my ego and everything else and my will to compete still made me go out there, right? But I was a guy that genetically wasn't gifted to the point where if I lost 10% or 5%, some guys can still go out there and compete at a high level. I was maxed out. So if I lose just a little bit, I'm not going to be as effective as some other guys, right? So that's kind of the philosophical part to it. Really, Joe, when it comes down to it, what made me miserable wasn't football, but it was my mentality towards football that made me miserable in my mental weakness. Okay, so I, for the first time in my life, became a victim, and I started complaining, and I started making excuses, and I started to talk all the time about like all the things that are happening to me, right? And guys, that is so self-destructive. Everybody has challenges, but once you start making excuses and once you start painting yourself as a victim, whether legitimate or not, there were some legitimate things that were happening that wasn't fair, that wasn't right. But I allowed myself to, instead of worrying about what it's going to take to execute and compete and be the best of the world, I started worrying about things that didn't matter, right? And basically it was the opinions and judgments of other people. Instead of knowing who I was as a player, as a safety, okay, the best linebacker type safety in the NFL, now I felt like I had to prove, well, I could play the pass too. I can play this. I could do this. I'm more of an all-around safety. And so then you start forgetting who you are, right? And you start trying to be somebody you think other people want you to be. I mean, we can go round and round on this concept, and I hope I explained it properly, but that put me in a really, really, really ugly place. And then the last part of it, Joel, was I would say that I didn't really have a strong Christian or a strong God component to my life at that point. And so my identity and my value and my mind to the world was as a football player, right? And so at the end of the day, that's a pretty shallow place to be, right? And so when things stop going well or things start happening and that starts to fall, your whole identity, the whole who you are starts to fall apart. Now all of a sudden you're left and you're pretty empty and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have anything else to offer, right? So it wasn't until I truly realized now in life, the God part, the family part, being a service to others, more so than the ego of, hey, I'm a professional athlete getting paid millions of dollars, right? I mean, it's a fine line between, you've got to have confidence and an ego to be able to go out there and compete against the best of the world, but still the humility and still being whole with all the other facets of your life. So, I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, but that's basically, it wasn't football that made me miserable. It was me that made me miserable.
It was the level of pressure without having an absolute top tier mindset to withstand the pressures, because it's kind of like you were able to climb and you got there, but you didn't have the innate self-worth feelings beyond football, and therefore that load that you could lift became greater in the NFL. And I'm guessing you have a flip side to that, whereas you found the self-worth and life became much happier as well. How did that happen?
Well, look, so when I think about mental toughness, right, I went from being somebody who was a search and destroy professional, like nothing could faze me. Nothing could stop me. And I was so goal oriented that it didn't matter what was in my way. It was just, I would obliterate it. But I was also an emotionless cyborg, right? who didn't have the ability to make relationships with people. So I think about it like this. If you remember the pictures of the egg under the microscope with all the billions of sperm around it, you know what I mean? I think of that as your brain, and the sperm are negative thoughts all trying to get in, right? And that egg is protecting, and you have to fight against the trillions and trillions of negativity that's trying to burrow and infect and get inside, right? And if one of those little sperm, those negative thoughts, if you let it get inside and burrow, then you can't stop it, right? You have to be that vigilant in your self-talk, in your self-image of who you are, right? So that's kind of the analogy. And when you let things, once you let one in, then another one gets in, and then another one gets in, and then it spirals out of control, and now you're a victim, and now you're making excuses, and then everything falls apart, and you can't do anything, right? You are not capable of fulfilling your potential and doing what you set out to be. It's a daily battle that's going on with all the negative influences and all the things that can infect, right? So that's kind of my analogy. And I finally let some things that were big ones, big legitimate stuff that I probably don't really want to talk about on this podcast, but I let it affect me. And then I started thinking and worrying about other things that were not conducive to performing at a high level.
Well, everything is based on results. And if you look at the results and how you've learned from life's lessons, that's why I was so excited to get you to share this. I'm knowing the story and having talked to you over the years about how you've overcome it. I think the other thing that's important for our listener to realize is everything changes. And it came time for you to leave the NFL. We know it's never a permanent field. I think, isn't that what the acronym is, NFL? Not for long. And it's a short career. In your case, 7 years. And then you went into TV broadcasting. And again, if you could explain how you took that rejection, because when you auditioned and tried out, they told you, no way, you can never be a commentator. And when we just talked last week, you just got another promotion to be in more primetime shows for your CBS Sports announcing for the football season coming up. How did you turn that all around from being below average, not even qualified, to having this contract that you've had for CBS Sports all these years?
Well, that's been a fun journey. I started in television about 10 years ago, and when I auditioned for the NFL broadcast boot camp, which is basically, if you do well there, then there's a good chance you're going to get it picked up. All the different media executives are there trying to scout talent. Well, needless to say, I bombed so bad. And the backstory to that, Joel, and you know this, I had really severe social anxiety for most of my life, well into my adult life. Never really felt comfortable in front of people, didn't feel comfortable speaking, just really didn't know and understand how to interact with people. Real severe anxiety. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. so going into television, probably I didn't have the personality to be able to thrive in that field. And my audition pretty much confirmed that. Almost every executive said, hey, this really isn't the field for you. You don't really have what it takes. You know, they're pretty brutally honest. And I remember after the first night when I called my wife and she said, how'd it go? I said, well, babe, it's not looking really good. I really, really, really bombed. It was really bad. And I remember saying this specifically because they had 3 executives judge us American Idol style. So they played our clip, our 3-minute clip on the big screen at NFL Films, and then we get critiqued American Idol style. And I remember telling my wife, I said, well, it didn't go very good. I bombed, I froze, I stammered, I stumbled. And the guy from CBS was really tough on me. I don't think I'll ever work for CBS, right? And so at that moment, I was actually pretty crushed. But then again, Joel, it comes back to deciding, okay, next day I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And I said, I'm going to make it in TV. And the reason that bothered me so much is that I realized on that stage, the only thing stopping me was what I thought of myself inside my head. The nervousness, the anxiety, the inability to perform, all of it was constructed by me. So what a shame if I don't fulfill one of my goals because I can't get out of my own way, because I'm my worst critic. I mean, think about that. And think about how many people in life out there don't do things because in their mind, they're scared of something. And that's a terrible way to live, right? And so I was so bothered that I let myself get in the way of something that I wanted to do, then I just turned that into my next goal, right? And so I started, and I knew that especially a guy that wanted to do NFL games, who didn't have the Hall of Fame pedigree, who wasn't a quarterback, who didn't have freshly retired, big star, those are the guys that get these jobs, right? So I knew that much like getting into the NFL, this was a long shot, right? That was my ultimate goal. And so I just did what I do. And I started working from the bottom, and I started doing, local high school games. I started doing things for free just so I could get comfortable in my own skin, being on camera and being able to speak. And it took me 2 or 3 years before I stopped getting that pounding heart feeling before I was getting ready to go on camera. It took a lot of work, and I wasn't making any money doing this, by the way. I was only making, either I was working for free or making $100 a game or something like that. But finally, I started to get better at my craft, get better and better. I started to get promoted here, there, and then now all of a sudden, I'm at CBS, and the same gentleman, Harold Bryant, our executive producer, who 10 years ago was really tough on me, is now still my boss, and now I'm one of the top teams at CBS. So it was a long journey, but it really illustrates that your self-image and how you feel about yourself inside, it starts there. And if you're your toughest critic, if you're the one that's beating yourself up every day, if you don't have that belief and you don't have that knowing that it's going to happen, then you don't stand a chance.
Wow. That's so wonderful. And it's absolutely so true that we are our own worst enemy, and the solution is within us. And that's what you proved in both of these. I mean, you made it to the highest level in 2 of the most competitive areas, the National Football League and television broadcasting. I mean, look how many athletes retire every year and say, oh, I'll just be a commentator like Charles Barkley in basketball or Shaq and do commercials. It doesn't work that way.
And in relationship. So
yes,
when you do these kind of things, you end up with a wife that's a Playboy playmate.
And 3 wonderful kids. Maybe just add one thing now about your coaching of your son's team.
I'm sorry, Joel. Can you say that again?
About your son playing football now, and how you're treating that.
Well,
I think that's very helpful too.
Well, I've got 2 boys and a little girl. So I have a 13-year-old boy, an 8-year-old boy, and a 7-year-old little girl. And I used to be kind of a hands-off. I didn't want to hardcore push my kids into sports because I believe truthfully that if your kids are going to be great at anything, right, it's got to come from within them. They have to light the spark. And then once the spark is lit, then I can help them and help them, push them and be on them, right? But it's not going to do any good if I want them to be somebody that they don't have it deep down inside to be. So I was never a hardcore driver of sports. And so I would always be the dad just sitting there watching, really helping him more with the mental aspect of how to deal with things. And then I decided that, I didn't like the way they were being coached. And so I felt like I had more value of helping these kids realize and fulfill their potential and get some confidence. And so I started coaching my older son, his tackle football team. I volunteer. I'm not the head coach because I have to work on weekends during the football season. And then I coach my middle boy. I coach his flag football team. And I got to tell you, it is so rewarding. I love working with these kids. There is no greater feeling of satisfaction in life than to teach a kid something and see the light bulb go off and instantly see in their face the confidence that they can do something. And I think it's especially tackle football where there's physical pain involved and you have to teach yourself to love to run into people full speed. That's a scary thing, right? I mean, think about it. These kids are 10, 11, 12 years old. That's not a natural thing, right? So there's some fear. You've got to overcome some legitimate fear. And when you teach them the right way, and then they feel it, like they really do it the right way, and they feel it, you can instantly see the confidence in their face. And there's no greater feeling than that. It is tremendous. Kids are such a blank canvas. And to see them experience success and belief in themselves, I think is the greatest gift that you can give any child.
Wow, that's so true. Yeah.
Well, that's such a wonderful bow on this wonderful and deep and philosophical and inspiring interview.
So we gotta.
I feel like we can get a few more hours out of this.
Yeah, I know. We're having fun here. Yeah. One thing I know other people would be interested is how did you meet your wife? How did you meet at the time a Playboy playmate? How did all that come together? You invited as an NFL player to the Playboy Mansion, or what happened?
Well, how does it all start? It starts with deciding and a belief of knowing, right? So funny thing is I was really, really single and really enjoying being single, and had no intentions of getting a long-term relationship, girlfriend, certainly didn't want a wife. Well, 2 years before I met my wife, I was watching Wild on E, right, with Brooke Burke. It was Wild on Cabo. And I remember my wife was co-hosting with her on that show. And I said to myself, I want to meet her. I need to meet that girl, right? I'd only said that one other time. That was with my college girlfriend, and that worked out too. But I just remember saying that, and then I kind of forgot about it. And so we're in Las Vegas. It was during March Madness. We were at Nine Steakhouse, right? And I saw this girl and her girlfriend walk past us with the general manager was escorting them to a table. And I said to myself, wow, I've got to meet this girl. Who is that? Right? And I thought there's no way she's there without a man. Like there's no way. Girls like this just don't walk around single, right? And so I was pretty shy, pretty reserved. And so I told the busboy who I knew, I said, Vince, the girl who was walking past, where is she? Is she with a guy? Right? And he said, oh no, she's right there behind you with her girlfriend. I said, Vince, I've got to meet this girl.
Were you in the NFL at this time already?
Yeah, this was in 2004. Yeah. Okay. And I said, Vince, I've got to meet this girl. Right. And he said, all right, hold on. So then the waitress comes back and said, "Hey, Adam, I told that girl that you wanted to meet her, and she said, well, you could just wait in line." Right.
Oh, wow.
And so I was just like, oh, come on, and I started to get a bad attitude about it. So then she ends up walking over by the bar, standing by us. And then I kind of like look at the busboy. And so he grabs her, he grabs me, he said, "Hey, I want you to meet my friend Adam." Right. So then we sit down. I say, "Hey, why don't you sit down, have a drink or whatever." So as we start talking, about 15 minutes goes by, and I say, "Wait a minute." I said, "Were you on Wild on E with Brooke Burke, doing that show?" And she goes, "Yeah, I did that." And in my mind, I was like, holy crap. I said, "This is the girl I said I was going to meet."
Oh.
Like this. And I didn't tell her that, but in my mind, I was like, I can't believe, like, this is 2 years ago. And so even though I was totally single, didn't want a girlfriend, from that night forward, we've pretty much been inseparable. And so that's kind of how it started. But it all started with speaking it into existence by telling myself that I was going to meet that woman.
Wow, that's amazing. Very cool.
How many years have you and Jennifer been married now?
Well, I kind of went about things backwards, and I don't know if I'm really proud of it, but we've been together. Let's see, we met in 2005, so 16 years, but married 11. So we didn't get married until after my son was born, which is kind of me being a weirdo.
Well, the thing is, you're not a weirdo anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where we've been; it's where we are.
Yeah.
And the results we're getting, and the relationship
Right.
you've got with your family, and your spiritual connection, and all of this growth. And I think as you're listening to this, that's what you have to think of in your own life, that it's a journey, and there's a plan. You're here for a purpose. And just like whether it was meeting Jennifer 2 years later, getting in the NFL 5 years after you're told you can't even get a scholarship, being told by the CBS boss that you'll never make it in broadcasting, none of those have to apply to you. If you make the decision and then do the work. And if we could go back and count how many times Adam said hard work, there's no easy way. If there's something easy about what you do, and it's not going to be rewarding. The greater the struggle, the greater the reward. Forget easy. Focus on results. What do you want to have happen? Robbie, any last comments before I give him the final words?
I think just gratitude, man. I think you shared a lot of powerful beliefs, a lot of powerful wisdom. This is the kind of things that you actually have to live it and apply and do and have hard work and then have knowledge and then come out of it with wisdom, right? And so it's amazing and just grateful for you, brother, being here and awesome, and all the best with everything you're doing in your life currently.
And then if we do all of that, you know what's going to happen? You can make it a great day every day.